My name is Richard Morellis, and I want to welcome you to the Prison Post. This is your podcast for conversations surrounding the need to reform prisons from the perspective of formerly incarcerated people, community members, and leaders in the restorative justice movement. The Prison Post will feature an episode every Wednesday with people who are in the fight to restore lives and heal communities. That's what's up, and we're back. Welcome to the Prison Post, everybody. My name is Richard Morellis, and this is my co-host, Jason Bryant.
That's me.
First time we ever wore short sleeve shirts together.
We're starting a new trend.
Yep. We have a great friend with us today, Robert Esquivel. We're starting our Men Built for Others series from our book, Men Built for Others. You could see it in my hand and also at the bottom left side of the screen. And Men Built for Others is a book that we published while we were incarcerated. It has 11 transformational stories in there, some of the most profound stories from people that we were all with while we were in Soledad. We were with them together, all but one were serving life sentences, and all 11 of them are now free. Robert's book is chapter 2 of the book. Robert's story is in chapter 2 of the book, and all of them are now free today, thriving and living in society. Robert was arrested at 17 years old, 1 month after his 17th birthday, but was sentenced at 18 years old to 48 years to life. And I want to share a little bit about you, Robert, but first I just want to welcome you, welcome to the Prison Post.
Thank you guys. Thank you guys for having me. I'm excited to be here. I'm looking forward to having this conversation with you guys. It's good to see you guys. We haven't seen each other in a while.
Yeah,
it feels like forever. I miss you guys. I miss, spending time with you guys, but I'm sure we'll all get squared away soon.
Yes, indeed.
But it's good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. And, Robert, you were one of our closest friends on the inside, and we spent hundreds of hours doing transformational coaching together. You and Jason worked together in the We Care program. We spent thousands of hours in groups together, helping other people to changing our lives in the process. But I'll give a little introduction to who you are for our audience. Like I said, Robert's story is in chapter 2 of our book, Men Built for Others. Robert was sentenced to 48 years to life 1 month after his 17th birthday. He served a total of 22 years in California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. He was released on November 12th, 2019. So it's been about 18 months. Robert's story is featured in our book, Men Built for Others, a book where 100% of the proceeds go towards a scholarship called Men and Women Built for Others Scholarship. It used to just be the Men Built for Others Scholarship, and now we'll be starting a series in the future called Women Built for Others, and interview some women with great transformational stories. Robert's one of a handful of men who facilitated, coached, and supported hundreds of his fellow incarcerated brothers through their personal transformation process as they pursued their unprecedented futures. He's living out his unprecedented future today, and I'm excited to have him share his story. He made it his mission on the inside to help people pursue their futures, their transformation, and becoming the people that they could become even when they didn't see it themselves. Robert is an artist. Even Jason Bryant has some of his art hanging in his home. He's a college graduate. He's mentored hundreds of youth through a program that was called We Care on the inside, We Care Youth Diversion Program. And he's one of CROP's AOD graduates. And not only did he get his state certification as an alcohol and drug counselor, he's also practicing using his certification today in Los Angeles as a substance use disorder counselor there in LA. As long as we've known Robert, he's been committed to paying it forward to his community as a man built for others. Welcome to the show once again, Robert.
Thank you.
I got to say, man, freedom looks good on you. You're looking pretty good, brother.
Thank you.
Smile still there.
Yeah, it's there.
So Richard made comment about Robert being an artist, and he also made a comment about me having some of Robert's art hanging on the walls of my home. So for those of our viewers who have seen some of the episodes that we shoot from home, in the background there's this picture of this amazing picture of painting of a blue man walking across the face of the sun. He's been mistaken as the Silver Surfer before, but it's actually Dr. Manhattan, one of my favorite comic book characters. And Robert did me the great favor of actually producing 2 paintings while we were incarcerated together, and sending them home to my wife. So my question to you, Rob.
Well, could I say something about that real quick?
Sure.
The other painting was of Jason's favorite character we know is Batman.
Batman kissing Catwoman. And
Yep.
and literally I gave Robert a picture and said, hey, can you do this? He's like, oh, this is cool. I got it. And he did it. And it was awesome.
And Catwoman looks like Sandy.
And Batman always looks like me.
Of course. and we all can see the resemblance of Robert and his favorite character, Captain America.
There you go. Bobby America. So
Bobby America.
My question to you, Rob, is I know you've been, practicing art, various forms of art for many years. What was your favorite piece of art that you produced inside? And are you continuing with your artistic practices out here?
So inside, you know what? It's hard to pick a favorite, as I develop, I'm all self-taught. So as I started to develop the skill, I mean, there's something about that Dr. Manhattan, I don't know. It just seemed like when I was painting that piece, like everything was just working right, So one of the Dr. Manhattan pieces, it's a beautiful piece. I really enjoyed doing that piece. It's one of my favorites simply because it just seems like the anatomy. Yeah. And I don't think I've ever painted or drawn the human anatomy at such a high level of detail. So that was one of my favorite ones. And as far as out here, and I haven't really had a lot of the time to actually sit and paint. I acquired the supplies, and I just haven't been intentional about it. It's been a difficult thing for me to find the time, or I just haven't made the time.
Sure. So
no, I haven't really produced anything. I did begin a tattoo.
Okay.
Again for a little bit, and then ran out of time with that. Like it was hard for me to find the time to make, to keep practicing that and getting more involved in that industry. My job requires a lot of time, and
it's crazy. It's really crazy how it's the same 24 hours that we had when we were in prison, but it goes by so much faster out here.
Yeah.
So much faster.
Yeah. It's an amazing experience. It's definitely no lockdowns taking place. Right. So the world's not going to slow down, and it isn't slowing down anytime soon. So yeah, it's again about, some of the skills that we've learned about being intentional about how you spend your time. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. People say, do you ever miss anything about prison? And I mean, really just the close relationships we had and the time we had to build those. But the other thing is them lockdowns. There are no lockdowns out here, There's no month or 10 months or 2 weeks to just, read 3 or 4 books and
knock out a 3-month course in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
None of that no more. But what I want to encourage you to do, Robert, is there's some restaurants. I'm in Sacramento, Jason's in Roseville, but there's some restaurants out here on a certain night of the week where they have painting night, where you go have a meal, or some people have a glass of wine, or they have painting night. And I see them out here. Maybe they have those. It could be a self-care / doing some of your work with other people, other artists. Something to think about.
Yeah, that's it's funny because I was just thinking about the whole lockdown thing, and even when the world did stop for COVID, my job didn't. Like,
right.
There was no days off, there was no vacation, there was no shutdown. Human services is not one of those fields where we're just gonna close it down. So even then, what I did wish, I hope, maybe they'll lock us down. Not when you're caring for other people, you're supposed to produce results for their best interest,
Yeah, brother, you're a critical worker.
That's
exactly.
Sure. That's for sure.
Once again.
Critical worker. Back to that, huh?
Yeah.
So critical worker, just to unpack it a little bit for our audience, whenever there was a lockdown, there was a certain level of support, incarcerated person support that the institution needed to continue to run.
Yep.
Whether it was in the kitchen.
And they wouldn't get locked down.
Yeah, they wouldn't get locked down. So whether it was the kitchen or maybe like a porter job, but in every vocation, there was the critical worker list. And I remember people used to fight to get on that critical worker list because I just want to get out of the cell, put me on the critical worker list.
Yeah.
Out here, we're looking to be not on the critical worker list.
Yeah. It's the opposite.
Yeah.
But it's a beautiful thing to know that you're still out there serving your community and helping those struggling with substance abuse and comorbidity. You know, I know that you and Johnny Howe work together. Johnny's been on the show. He said a lot of great things about you. And to know that you're out there, man, you're on the front lines. And maybe you could talk about that a little bit. And I want to get into the book.
Okay.
I know how close you are with your mom and hear a little bit about what that was like to reunite with them, your dad. I know you're very close with your dad. Not a lot of people who are incarcerated still have their dads in their life. And then also one of the things I think about with you, Robert, is the transformational work, the coaching work, the time you spent helping people see who they could be, what they could do, and how to go from point A to point Z in their life by using new tools of thinking and casting a vision for their future. We talk about unprecedented futures. We've had those conversations on the show we did last week, and you're somebody who's really good at helping people go from a place where they don't see that they could be to a place where new horizons open up, new spaces created to, just like you. Maybe at one time, I remember when I first met you in the gym and we're talking about all the programs we were going to build and all this. And you're like, man, I'm going to probably be in here forever. You know, I got 48 to life. And that was before a lot of laws changed. And then, you know, you casted a vision for college. You casted a vision to be a counselor. And then now you're living out as a counselor while free. So what do you got?
So let's back up a little bit. So Rich is talking about when you first met him. And I remember our first encounter as well. Robert and I went through the first Cornerstone training together. And share with us a little bit, Robert, about your transformational moment. Like when you knew that the life you had been living wasn't going to get you the future that you wanted for yourself.
So prior to like investing in the transformation, Richard's right. Like I wasn't interested in having a transformational conversation with anybody. Many of the conversations that were based on transformation for people or just for the individual at Soledad were conversations that I felt like I was left out of because of the sentence that I had, the 48 to life sentence. And I was when I got to Soledad, I was like on my 13th or 14th year.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't, I knew I was searching for something, but I just wasn't searching for that conversation because most of the people there had done 20, 15. And that was a very, pertinent conversation for them at that time because things were changing.
Right.
But they weren't changing significantly enough for some of us who had those, what they called the Buck Roger years, right?
Sure.
The future dates. So I remember, I was angry when I was there. I was in full on despair. So I wasn't even willing to entertain a conversation about what was possible. I remember sitting in the gym, like going through these self-help classes and these group meetings and, attempting to soak up what was being said, but it always came to like a full-on collision where I was like, well, you still got 48 to life. You'll be 36 to 38 when you get your first opportunity to even go before a parole board. So why are you wasting your time? It was a painful conversation that I used to have internally. It was a very hurtful, internal dialogue that I had about my circumstances or the position that I was in while incarcerated. So, I try to avoid it as much as possible, So I wasn't offering myself very many opportunities for transformation when I first got there. And when, even being afforded those opportunities through help, the higher education learning project, which was prior to the Phoenix Alliance. And then, through all the multitude of groups that were going on there, I was just, I was being like stubborn.
Right.
Like,
Giving yourself
extremely defiant of what was possible,
Sure. Just refusing to give yourself over to the possibility of hope.
Yeah. And so, for the first 2 years, I believe in Soledad, like I was up to no good, man. You just, using cell phones, still using drugs, I wasn't willing to consider that there was something else possible for me.
Robert, I remember in the book, and I just want to read a couple of the things that you said in the book about your transformation, that you had been living criminally until 2010. You had already had, 12, 13, 14 years in, and you recalled the wisdom of your father. And to quote you, you said, I remember what my dad said. He said, son, I'm going to fail you. So look to God and ask him to hold you. And when he does, hold on as tight as you can. And you said a pivotal transformational shift occurred in a small classroom with a group of men and a woman during a 3-day workshop. That was a workshop that you were in with Jason, with our master trainers, Daniel and Eileen Takini, who came in to train us to be coaches. He said, at the end of the second day, I was asked to take the night to cast a 10-year vision for my life with me as the hero of the story. And this assignment proved to be difficult. I was no longer the same little kid who thought of himself as a villain. As I cast a 10-year vision, I allowed myself to think of a future worthy of a man of God, and I haven't looked back since. And I'm uncomfortable thinking of myself as a hero. I can say with honesty and sobriety that with the strength of my Lord and Savior, the support of my family and friends, and my commitment to a future worth having, I have secured personal freedom to do the right thing. I'm responsible, and I am present to the people I love. If this is heroic, I humbly accept that title. Do you remember that?
Yeah, that was, I do. I actually remember that, like, very clearly. Even the conversation with my father, I remember that vividly, that conversation happened over, I think it was the holidays, and I'm talking to my father, and I'm in this like super state of despair. Like I have this sadness that's overwhelming me, knowing that, or believing at that time that no matter how hard I try, it wasn't going to get me any further into my 48 to life sentence, and that this was it, and here I am asking my father, who I didn't have much of a relationship with growing up. He was, he was an abusive alcoholic, as for the majority of the time that I spent with him. So here I am, like as a son, asking for these divine words from my father, the man who gave me life, hoping that somehow, some way he could ease the pain that I'm experiencing at the time, and possibly offer me like a ray of light or hope that I could latch onto. And man, I remember him saying that to me when I asked him, like, I remember him telling me, because my father became Christian a few years ago, actually, like maybe close to now, maybe over like close to 12 or 15 years. So here I am asking this man who I notice is different now, who I want to be different. Here I am, being vulnerable and putting my pride aside and all my hurts and my hangups to ask him a question like, dude, like give me some divine knowledge that you've acquired throughout the years that's going to help me get through this year, because I was in like really bad shape. I did what I did well, which was lie and put on a facade and make sure that people weren't aware of it. But I was in really bad shape. And, I was desperate for something. And, being in Soledad, it just felt like it just felt like there was this amount of pressure that I was put under, because here I am wanting to do the right thing, and here's this place that I'm in that's affording people the opportunity for transformation, and here's this place that's also not going to afford me the opportunity of benefiting from my change. These ideas that I had. So I'm asking this man, like, and I rarely asked my dad for anything, let alone talk to him the whole time I was incarcerated. And he tells me, like, simple and plain, man. He goes, I don't have nothing for you. Mm. He goes, all I have is this. Is like, he goes, just grab onto Jesus, man. He goes, grab onto God and don't let go. Because me, he goes, I don't have anything for you. I'm going to fail you. Mm. He goes, I don't have anything to give you. And I was so angry when he told me this. Like, I was like extremely angry and hurt. I was livid because, here I had this moment where I was exposing myself to my father, exposing my pain, the suffering that I was undergoing. In my head, I was thinking, like, this is it. Like, this is life. There's a part in the book where I say that, like, laying on the metal bunk was like laying in a coffin, Yeah. And that's where I would lay my head for the rest of my life, And he had nothing for me. That was my experience. Like, he had nothing for me.
And yet he had everything.
Yes. And yet he gave me everything that I needed in those few words, in that little bit of advice. His wisdom, like, it shined through, knowing that what I needed was something bigger than him. What I needed was something that had helped him save his life. And so that, at first it didn't seem that way, but when I thought about it more and more, and I did my own investigating, and I had conversations with a lot of the Christian brothers who were in prison, and I realized that was the best piece of advice I could have ever gotten from anyone. Wow. My dad at that time was fulfilling his fatherly duty by giving me a type of knowledge that would just expand and would just expand my mind and help me become the best person I could possibly be under whatever circumstances.
That's awesome. Share with us, Rob, a little bit about, like, your first opportunity to really immerse yourself in a transformational perspective, particularly the 3-day seminar that we went through together. What was that experience like for you, and what did that open up in your thinking?
Man, that experience for me was, I don't believe
So what was it about it that that shocked you or hit you, or as you're talking right now, I remember that fight. Like, the people talk about the two dogs that are inside of us, that the one that you feed the most wins out, right? And I remember you, struggling, like, do I want to immerse myself in this rehabilitative and transformational work and these programs and start doing all this, even though I have so much time to go? And am I going to live this life, this life of a man built for others, this life of character, even though I have 48 years to life? Or am I going to continue down this path of, partying and getting high and just accepting the despair of my life? And I remember that struggle in you was so real. And then you hit this 3-day seminar with Jason, with Daniel Tacchini. I was in the room with you for those 3 days as well, having gone through my own. And there was something that stuck with you even to this day. And maybe, I think, Jason, speaking to that, what was it that real wake up call for you? And maybe it was the 10-year vision.
Yeah, actually, that was a big part of it. The 10-year vision, I remember trying to avoid it the night before, because I was working on some assumptions. It would be for the third day. The second day, the first day they assigned homework to us. Yeah. And on the second day, they didn't read it.
Like the homework was for you.
Yeah. So I had these assumptions, like, who's going to know?
Yeah.
Who's going to know? But I remember the commitment that I made going into it to fully participate.
That part.
And what were those ways to avoid? And I was trying to avoid it so bad that night to do the assignment because I was scared to cast a vision. So I tried to figure out what else I could do to avoid it. But then that self-betrayal, you know, like, well, wait a minute, this is what you signed up for. You know, if you could keep your commitment now, you've broken so many throughout your life.
Right.
How about you keep this one? And there was just something. I can't explain it. It just kept calling me to it. So I had to get it done. I needed to get it done. I needed to finish well on the third day.
Yeah.
So I sat there and I wrote it. And it dawned on me. So many things. That experience of writing it was like, it's hard to find the words. It was truly enlightening. It was healing. It was cathartic. And I had one of those aha moments. Back then I would have called it S-H-A-I-T moment, but you know, it was an aha moment. You know, it was like you could do this.
Right.
This is doable. You know, you can, despite of what's happening, in spite of your circumstances, you can become a better human being.
Yeah.
That was a very transformational moment for me because the numbers weren't changing. The 48 to life was still there.
Sure. It was transformational for all of us. And I just want to share a little bit about it. You know, we went in there day 3, and I think a lot of us were working under that assumption that, you know, maybe we don't have to turn the homework in because we didn't have to do it on day 2. But Robert got up there and he read his 10-year vision, his vision for a future, an unprecedented future. And he shared it in such an authentic way that it moved everyone in the room. And at the end of the day, we did an exercise called Power Cups. And just a short version of what that exercise entails, you know, there were 10 of us who were participants in the seminar. And the invitation was to have 2 cups, right, that you would give away that were infused with this power that you one time felt. And you wanted to make the investment in someone who would be a good steward of that power. And Robert got 10 cups.
10 cups? That's the world record. I never seen no one get 10 cups.
Yeah, 10. It was high. It was 10.
Yeah, it was high. I don't know if it was, but it
might have been 9. Yeah. Maybe one person missed them, but almost everyone in our group collectively said that we want to invest in Robert because he showed up in such an authentic way, and it was just so real. And that, to me, it was like a testament to not only the power of transformation, but the power of manifestation. When you fully participate, because he fully participated in that exercise. You know, he put his heart on that. In that vision, and everybody got it, and it was like, you know what, I'll invest in him. He's a good investment.
And what I want to say, Robert, there's something cool about the book. Speaking to Jay's point, is that you were one of the people that in your writing of that chapter, being that you're a superhero fan, and along with Jason, you contrasted the villain and the hero, even though you humbly, you know, wouldn't walk around calling yourself a hero, but you made that contrast of living life as a villain for so many years. And to create space, these people came in and allowed you to create space of what would life look like if I wasn't the villain? What would life for me look like, even if I had to die in here and I lived as a man built for others in here, what would it look like? And most people in prison don't do that, right? Most, you know, what are you going to do tomorrow? Man, I'm just trying to make it through the day. Yeah. You know, but what about 10 years from now? What are you going to do when you get out? Man, I'm just going to get out. Where are you going to work? I don't know. Mom said I could stay with her. They don't allow themselves that space to cast a vision because just one, prison isn't conducive to it. And another one is it's just rare to even think that way in there. And they opened up that for us. And so many people are living out their visions now. I was talking with Dan Tacchini the other day on LinkedIn. And, you know, he's out in Idaho. He's living out his vision out there in Idaho on some farm in the mountains and having fun. But a lot of the visions that we cast for ourselves, we're living far above and beyond them. We know now that we didn't cast big enough. You know, we thought that they were just so great and grand back then when we were casting them. Like, this couldn't possibly happen. And then not only does it happen, but we're doing greater things than that. And I'll always be grateful to them for creating that space in our mind for us.
So, Rob, tell us a little bit about the work afterwards. So, you received this ancient wisdom from your dad, and then you go through this transformational experience. But then you got to work.
Yeah,
you got to work. Share with us a little bit about some of your leadership in, whether it was Phoenix Alliance, Avatar. Like, what was the motivation for you to give in such incredible ways to the community at CTF Soledad and beyond?
So I remember, having this conversation with a mutual friend of ours when he was my roommate, Jesse Arevalo.
Okay.
And part of my transformation was I knew that 48 years was never going to change. I knew that at that time that was something that I had no control over. But what I did have control over was over myself and what I had to offer. So I was at Soledad, which was like a hotbed of transformational work that was taking place and needed more people to do the work. So, my biggest investment was to change myself, to be more giving, to be of service, to help those who did have the opportunities leave in the best condition that they could leave. That was, in a nutshell, the commitment. They were going out to, a lot of people were getting opportunities to go to board, and if I could help them leave prison in a better state than when they first came in, that's what I would want for myself. Despite when my opportunity would come, then why not be part of that? And, I was afforded a lot of opportunities to stay in those conversations, to contribute, to give, to essentially pass on the gifts that a lot of my friends like you guys were passing on to me, and, other people who were involved in the transformational work that we were doing there, and it was life-saving to me. It was you get better by practicing. It doesn't matter how much talent you have.
Yeah.
You want to be a better servant, you serve. So that was, that made sense. I remember asking Jesse Bonderman, I said, like, how do I get better? How do I get better at this transformational work? How do I become more equipped to do it effectively? Or, how do I he goes, I remember him telling me, just soaking it till you're wet.
Soaking it till you're wet.
I was like, okay, all right. Like, that makes sense to me. Just soaking it till you're wet. Yeah. And that means I had to stay in it, and it wasn't all about me.
Huh? Yeah, that's a good point. It wasn't all about me. It was about others.
Yeah.
And you made that shift, for 10 years. 10 years of immersion, day in and day out. I mean, me and you lived in the same building, and I remember even when you had the job where you had the barbershop, you're in there working during the daytime, doing your work hours, helping people, and you were in a ton of programs. There were very few people who did more service work in there than you, guys like you, Jay, Johnny, just day and night, and you were rewarded for it. You're rewarded for it. The governor of California sought to give you a commutation, submitted a commutation. So you didn't do the 48 years to life. I mean,
no,
we don't want our guests thinking that California has some type of third time out here. I'm pretty sure you were sentenced to like 85% or 100% time.
Yeah.
But you got commuted by the governor and set free. And
yes,
after 22 years. And man, are you even 40 years old yet?
42.
Oh, 42. Okay. So still a young man. Me and
Jay are the same age, I believe.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
But Robert, there's a line in the book, and I want to take you back a little bit. Powerful, powerful story, harsh story. There's a lot of people that have had trauma in their lives, but I would think that of everybody in the book, and not only in the book, but of anybody that I've ever met, there's few people that have experienced um, the type of trauma that you have, that definitely contributed to your way of thinking and your incarceration. There's few people that have known that type of pain. And to quote you from the book, you said, "My transformation began with an awakening, an unearthing of my past, an embracing of my present, and the casting of a vision for my future. I had experienced profound heartache and tragedy that left me in a state of anger, fear, and emptiness and despair. My despair proved to be an emotional environment perfectly suited for my inner villain. It was a dark place where I chose to surrender my God-given greatness." And then you began to tell the story about your brother being shot and how that impacted you. And I know that you're a guy who you wear your emotions on your sleeve. You get, not only have you given yourself over to service, but you've given yourself over to serve people with love, and you have a big heart for people of compassion. And sometimes the people that have those kind of hearts are the people that have experienced the most pain. They're able to contain the suffering of others, and maybe that's why you're doing some of the work that you're doing today with some of the most hurting in society, because you know what it's like to hurt, and so you're able to still reach back today. But if you would you want to share a little bit of that story for our audience, and um, how that impacted you?
Um, yeah, I mean, that was probably one of the hardest, if not the hardest thing I've ever had to experience. Just, it's one of those experiences that I think most people get to see in a movie theater, as part of an action sequence scene in a movie, Um, so, experiencing it in real life and having it happen to someone that was like essentially like your the closest person to you was extremely traumatic. It was devastating. It was a lot of pain and suffering that I had to that I at that time had to find a way to cover up.
As a
Um,
teenager.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It was like it was brutal and traumatic. You know, um, my brother was shot 5 times in like he was shot 5 times in a gang related crime. Right up the street where I grew up, right up the street from where we lived. And I was the first guy to arrive there. It's just, that intuition. You hear the gunshots ring, and, I ran up there. So, I got to see all that, and, and I was holding them while, waited for the paramedics. And that was very traumatic and trying. I didn't know how to deal with that stuff in the aftermath. After a lot of that stuff was said and done, I was kind of just on my own, left to my own devices, like trying to figure out what it all means, and just stewing over all the things that had happened and this belief system that I had grown up with, and what it meant, and how much worse this was because it was my brother and it was someone close to me. I was, man, I was hurting. Like, man, there's no other way to say it. And I was doing a lot of things to try to cover it up. I know that, I don't think most of my friends, cause I'll be 100% when I say, like, most of my friends, my brothers I met in prison, those are some of the men that I looked up to. I don't think I ever really shared it till I wrote the story, how traumatic or to the specificity that I did on some level in that book. I think when I wrote that and people read that in the book, or in the manuscript, I think it surprised a lot of people that I had been walking around with all of this, in my heart. And yeah, man, that the best way to put it is, I was thinking like a victim, walking like a victim, acting like a victim, and it was all just due to the fact that I had experienced this severe level of trauma at a very young age that I decided to take and mold beliefs around it, um, beliefs that were detrimental to other people, that weren't any good, that were intended to cause harm. So yeah, it was I don't believe that most people knew I was walking around with that kind of a story, I think that was a surprise to a lot of people. And I even heard a couple guys, like, they were really close to me, say, "Oh, now it makes sense why you're so angry sometimes." So, it was a difficult thing to experience, and at that age, experiencing it's like kind of like I remember the experience of just like I was being rushed through that experience, like I was being pushed through it. I wasn't
not given time to process.
No, because there was no time to process, because that's the genuine experience that I had, because I couldn't go to my parents because they were overly busy with taking care of him, being at the hospital, sleeping in the hospital, taking care of my brother. A lot of my family members, they weren't available to me. It was just kind of like, he needs us more now. So, and I on some level, I don't really think they knew the experience that I had. Like, they knew I was there. They knew I was the one holding them, but I don't think they stopped to think about what an experience may be like for a teenager, and you're trying to, stop the bleeding from your brother's head, so I don't think they knew that. So it was overlooked. And the only people who were paying attention were the people that were also, influential in that gang life with me, and having conversations about revenge and vengeance, and so I didn't have time to process a whole lot of that stuff, and those things ended up becoming very vicious in my own thinking, in my own belief system.
It's interesting, Robert, because there's actually a couple different things that I'm hearing as you share your story. The one is, like, I think it's maybe a little bit of a human inclination as a defense mechanism to, like, not pay attention to what's really going on. And particularly, like, maybe your parents and your family members, like, I'm sure it was traumatic for them as well to have their son, their nephew, shot 5 times. And, instead of, like, confronting the reality of what's going on, like, we have our teenage son who experienced that as well. We need to tend to him. It's like, well, we're just going to pretend like he's okay, right? So there's maybe that. And then on the other hand, when you're talking about the gang culture, right, I think about, like, when we're in prison and sometimes we see some pretty crazy stuff, some violent stuff. And, it'll be going down on the yard, and as soon as it's done, like, we'll be sitting down and it'll be like, well, I wonder if they're going to resume program. I wonder if they're going to run canteen. I'm next in canteen, right?
Yeah.
And it's almost like this desensitization of violence.
Then you cut off empathy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
We've heard the term hurt people, right?
Yeah.
And I remember the profound line that you shared, which is like a far more profound way of saying it. You said, "I thought that giving myself over to violence would help me avoid suffering. I thought that giving myself over to violence would help me avoid suffering." And then you have the gang cultures of like, man, you got to get your get backs. That's your brother. what are you going to do? And probably as a, 16-year-old, like, what do you want me to do? Go and kill somebody in return? I'm trying to deal with my brother just almost losing his life, and my parents are distraught, and they're at the hospital every day, and I have a little sister, and how do I cope? I mean, there's, I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure, like in our culture, your culture is not. You're not at counselors and therapists and getting all this help and talking it through, and and you don't know what to do, and so what seems best is uh, lashing out in violence and thinking that that'll some way bring back the brother that I had before, or solve something. And I remember when you were writing the story, though. I remember um, it's only about 8 or 10 pages long, but I remember you would go in the cell and write for a while, and we'd be down in like the barbershop or something, and then you'd come out and take a break from writing and be emotional, and then you'd go back and do some more like the next day, and then because it was really the first time that you put it on paper and allowed yourself to heal there.
Yeah, it was actually the first time. I remember, you know, I remember an attorney who was helping me, trying to get me to write this story, for whatever mitigating factors they could pull out of it. And I never wrote it for them. And I remember being asked to make my contribution to this book. And I thought about like, whoa, I'm about to expose my secret. I'm about to, people knew I had lost a brother, the violence. But they didn't know like the finer details of the experience of losing a brother and going through the trauma that I went through. So I remember, me and Ted having this conversation, and, Ted has a way of asking you for things. I'm going to need you to write the story. It doesn't really seem like a question.
A very kind way of asking.
Yeah, very, and, I needed that though.
Yeah, with love.
I needed that. Like I needed that from a lot of you guys. That coaching when I was in doubt, the coaching when I wasn't confident, the coaching when I needed to get out this poison out of me.
Amen.
And a lot of you guys were very integral in coaching me through things. So that was Ted's coaching, telling me, hey, I'm not trying to hear the rest. Just get it done.
It's like a big brother way of saying, I need you to heal too.
Yeah.
Because I remember we would work with college students in the visiting room, Robert, and you would, after that, you began to share that story with them. And I'll let you know this, me and you have been on the phone, probably 10 times since being out, but this is the first time I get to see you. But we've got a lot of feedback from people who have purchased the books out here. Even family members. Most people say a few things about the book. I never read a whole book in a day. I read this whole book in a day. I never read a whole book in my life. I read this whole book in a day. I never read a book that I cried so much to. There's a lot of pain there, but as we say, there's from pain to possibility, the arc of transformation, from the pain of seeing my brother shot 5 times to the knowledge of knowing this guy went on to get a commutation and be set free and be of service and love people and share a story in profound ways. To this day, the ripple effect of you putting it on paper is still helping heal other people.
Yeah.
So, hurt people, but heal people too. So Thank you for sharing it in the book, and thank you for sharing it today.
I remember having that conversation with Ted, and he would come and check. I think at that time he was living next door with Craig, I believe. And he would come in and check on me. And I think I wrote it all. I only wrote one draft of it. And I think it was a 2-day thing, the one day to get it down and the next day to try to refine some things and multiple breaks in between. But yeah, it was the original draft that I submitted. And I remember having that conversation with Ted and a couple of other guys, and I didn't want that to be my story. I didn't want to expose myself in that way. I didn't want, some of that old thinking came back where like I didn't want people to know that I had a moment of weakness, that I had a moment of pain and suffering. I didn't, even though I was doing the work and learning how to be a better servant and how to become a better human being, there was still some of that old belief system where I don't want anybody to have any evidence on me that I was weaker or more vulnerable than I want them to know. And I remember thinking like, man, I don't even want this story to be mine, but it is. And what's the best possible option that I have? If I don't want it to be mine and it can be used to prevent someone else, maybe to, to spark an idea in someone that could lead them to become remorseful about some of the things that they've done, or possibly, at that time we're doing a lot of the We Care stuff and helping these young men transform their lives. If I could share an idea or a story, a real life experience that would help them move away from this crap, move away from this destructive belief system, then why not just give it away? I don't even want it myself. Right. But what if there could be some good that could be done? Why not give it away? And God has a way of working things out where he makes the opportunity available. And the Men Built for Others book, and mucking for a young man for his tuition, and said, what better place?
Yeah. And not only that, but at the top end of the book, you said that your favorite book, we asked everybody, every author of the book, what's your favorite book? And Robert said, Man's Search for Meaning.
Yeah. Viktor Frankl.
Yeah. And it's no coincidence there, because you found freedom in the ability to choose.
Yeah.
And that's what he said, the last of human freedoms that no one can take from you is the ability to choose, and the ability to choose your attitude, really. Right?
Yeah.
So one of the things that, we were exposed to in our training was the resource in living in a question. And that question is, what's next? So, you cast your vision all those years ago, back in 2012 or 13, and here we are. You're a free man, commuted by the governor of California. You're a certified alcohol and other drug counselor serving your community. What's next, Robert? What's next?
It's a good question. One I've asked myself frequently. I'm still very single.
And ready to mingle.
Yeah. And I think that's purposeful. I think for me, it's been, being out, of course, as you guys know, is not without its own challenges. So I'm meeting up to those challenges, trying to stabilize my credit, trying to fix my, my credit history, and, trying to build something stable for myself. So I'm not rushing through it. I was fortunate enough, that I got an opportunity to come work with this new reentry organization called Mass Liberation. And I came in as what they call a peer advocate to help some of the guys navigate through it. And I helped manage their house on the side of my my regular job. And you know what? I'll be honest with you. Like, my first goal is to just be stable, like to find some stabilization for myself, my own place. I was working at a private facility as much as I was working at the public one. That wore me out. So I knew that working 7 days a week was not part of the vision.
Sure. Gotta have some downtime.
Yeah. Working double shifts was not. But you know what? It's just becoming stable, learning how to become whole again. The vision is to spend more time with my family. I realized that part of me took them for granted. I'm fortunate to still have my dad and my mom. I'm have a really good relationship with my dad, my mom too. But I want to give them more time.
Yeah.
And although it's a difficult thing, it's a balancing act. For right now, that's what's working, is making sure that I'm taking care of me, and that, keeping my options open for love, possibly, and also making sure that I'm present for my parents. They're getting older, and my friends. You guys are far away. I wish I could. Hopefully, real soon, I'll be able to take a train trip up there. I've been talking about. But I'm also keeping in touch with all the other guys. The other men built for others. Like, I was with Gilbert Rosales yesterday. And I got to see Johnny. I see Johnny practically every day, but I got to see him yesterday too, under some really rough conditions, so I'm still processing the experience I had yesterday, and I would like to share a little bit, if it's okay.
Please.
So yesterday we went to a memorial. There used to be these, her name is Maria Fierro and David Merrihew, which were part of the Gogi organization. They used to come see us in Soledad. Unfortunately, their daughter, took her own life last week.
Wow.
So, we all went to her memorial just, to support her parents, and there was a lot of people there who are part of the reentry community, just like they were, part of the Gogi family. They were there. So I just ended up seeing them yesterday, and they're doing great. They're still committed to, service, but that's something really important for me that really drives to keep my relationship with the people who are part of my transformation intact.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not really good at, on this phone stuff. I'm really not. It's been a minute. But I understand a lot of the things now that when I was in there and some of our friends were getting out. I understand what it's like to miss your real friends. So that's important to me. It was also, for me, my relationship with you guys, with other guys who are down here, man, they're lifelong. There's no separation. There might be some distance between us, but damn, man, I miss you guys. I love you guys, and we'll see each other soon in person. But yeah, it's it's part of the commitments that that I want to keep bringing into the future, and getting better at this technology stuff.
Oh yeah, it's a mountain.
Yeah.
And it changes every day.
Yeah, I mean, these guys are they're talking about Snapchat, and I'm like, what's that? What do you do with that? He goes, oh, you put a story. I said, oh, I'm pretty good with stories. I'm done for now.
Yeah. Rob, we got a couple minutes here.
No problem.
To wrap up. Jason, some closing words.
I just want to say, we love you too.
Yep.
Such an amazing amount of respect for you and gratitude for you. And you said something about time, right? We started off talking about time. Time does move faster out here. There's so many more responsibilities, but it'll forever be our most precious commodity because it's the one thing we can't get back, right? So I appreciate you and I honor you for investing your time and serving other people, Robert. It's commendable.
Thank you.
Yeah, Robert, I'm so grateful that you were the first of the Men Built for Others, of the 11 stories in here, the 11 authors of Crop Organization's book. You were talking about Ted earlier. Ted is executive director of Crop Organization. And, what's funny is I can relate to what you're saying. And I've got together with family members who I haven't seen in years. And there's a gap because I don't know them as adults. And yet when we get together with our old lifer brothers that we spent a decade or more together with, it's like we didn't miss a beat, just like this show. You know, we haven't seen you in, for me, 18 months, or 2.5 years for me, but I've been on the phone with you. But it's like we could pick up and start working together tomorrow and have any conversation, because of the bond we built for years. And I'm going to get more intentional about being in touch. Yeah. We love you, Robert. Thank you for sharing your story. Continue to be a light. You know, you're a city on a hill that cannot be hidden, man. You got a lot of power and beauty for the world, and continue to share it. Continue to do what you're doing as a counselor, as a coach, as a friend, as a brother, and as a son. Get to your parents' house. You know, if that's on your heart, get to their house, man, and thank your dad for the wisdom he had for you. And we'll give you we want to thank you for coming on the Prison Post. This has been Prison Post is of course under the umbrella of the Crop Organization. Our book is available on our website, croporganization.org. You could also find it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target. And we encourage you to get it. It's powerful stories we'll be having on all the guests. And if you'd like to give a donation to Crop Organization, you can text CROP at 91999 to give to our Ready for Life program that Jason leads. We put formerly incarcerated people to work in the tech industry and provide leadership development, digital literacy, and financial literacy training. Robert, we love you. Thank you for being a guest on the Prison Post.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Can I say one last thing? To like all the families and all the guys who'll be seeing this, who feel like, like the numbers just don't make sense, or the numbers are just too much, man. The truth is that there's documentation and proof and evidence of many people who have had an immense amount of numbers and got to work.
That's right.
And found their way home to their families. So don't lose hope, man. And, don't let despair cast that big shadow over your life. Just keep working, be of service, evolve, become a better human being, and you will see the rewards.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Robert.
Thank you, guys.
All right.
Thank you for listening to The Prison Post, a production of the Crop Organization. We'll be sharing more stories from the world of prison reform and restorative justice, so please join us. You can listen to The Prison Post on all major podcasting platforms. Subscribe to our video cast on YouTube and like us on Facebook at The Prison Post and at Creating Restorative Opportunities and Programs.